Greetings from Tokyo, I'm Trip, and welcome to the Hammer of Wrath. This week, we continue the Summer of the Wolf and try to summon a brief respite from the blistering summer heat by painting Njal the Stormcaller. Let's go. Thanks for joining me in the studio. This week, you and I are going to continue the Summer of the Wolf by painting Njal the Stormcaller. But first, I want to talk very briefly about Warhammer 40,000. As evidenced by the channel, most of my involvement with 40k comes from the hobby side. However, I was recently given the chance to play 10th edition for the first time, and having played 9th edition only once, 8th edition never, and 7th edition maybe 4 or 5 times, it was a bit of a learning curve. Thankfully, I had a gracious opponent in my friend Jose, who runs an amazing and meat-grindery Blood Angels force that comes with a lot of jump intercessors. Now, of course, being in Tokyo has many advantages, and one of which is being able to travel to the Warhammer Cafe and store in Akihabara and reserve and play on one of their amazing themed tables. For this battle, I had the chance to play on the Orc Scrapyard, and it made for an absolutely incredible environment for a pitched battle between the Space Wolves and the Blood Angels. As this was going to be my first game in years, I didn't expect to win, but I did build a list from the Space Wolves that we've been painting from the Summer of the Wolf, as well as some units I completed during our monthly Combat Patrol Challenge. This list was in no way competitive, as I didn't have any units of Wolfguard Terminators to attach to our recently painted Logan Grimnar or Arjak Rockfist, but I still had a great time playing, and many of the units like the Blood Claws, led by Njal Stormcaller, and the Grey Hunters, led by a Wolf Priest, performed really well, surviving several assaults and returning tons of damage. In the end, I lost by a few victory points and conceded the game at the end of turn 4, but overall I had a great time and it was a massive learning experience for me. A single game showed me the weaknesses and gaps in my army and the units I needed to build. And the entire experience has inspired me to continue along our journey through the Summer of the Wolf. In this week's video, I'm going to show you how I built and painted Njal Stormcaller so that he could lead my Blood Claws into battle. Let's crack this model open and get it put together so we can join it to one of our infantry squads. It comes on a single character sprue with a 40mm base. We're going to use our single-sided nippers in order to separate the parts. And as always, we're using Tamiya Thin in order to assemble the model. The Precision Brush applicator allows us to put the glue exactly where we need it to join the parts together, and helps prevent us from using too much of the glue causing a mess on the model. As a character model, this is a mono pose build. There are no weapons options or variety of any kind, but we are going to put it together in a few sub-assemblies. The way the model is holding its staff in front of itself would make it really hard to reach the pelt that is hanging in the tabard area and the details on the chest if we put it all together. So what we'll do here is assemble the body down to the left and right arms, and once we've got that the way we want it, we're going to go ahead and have a sub-assembly that includes the staff, a separate assembly for the head, and a final assembly here for the crow and the power pack. Now, he comes on a scenic rock base with these floating stones in front of him, but for whatever reason, one part of the rock is still attached to his foot. Another strange choice by Games Workshop here. Why not just have the stone be a completely separate thing? I've got this great resin base that I want to attach it to, but I'm not exactly sure how to line it up. I want to mark where I should super glue it down. So what we'll do is set him on his base, and I'm going to use the airbrush to put some primer down, and we're going to use that in order to indicate what areas the base would actually set. So we'll use some super glue here. Remember, we're attaching plastic to resin, so you need to use super glue. And then I'm going to dry fit the model onto that to make sure that everything is going together properly. So I'll put the rocks together and I'll put that right foot into the peg. I'll make sure it fits on the base securely and there are no gaps, so I know exactly where to put the pieces. Once we've got that together, we're going to start priming the model. It's time to prime, as I like to say. Here I'm using Vallejo Black Polyurethane Primer. You'll notice I've put some poster putty on certain connections of the model as I'm priming. We want to leave that plastic bare. That's going to allow the plastic cement, when we do our final assembly, to work a lot better than trying to work through layers of paint. And then a white zenithal prime over the top. This is going to identify our shapes and shadow areas. And speaking of shadow areas, we start with Vallejo Gray Blue from underneath. This is sort of like a reverse zenithal. We're going to use this in all of our shadows, so we spray that from the bottom. And then from the top, our secret sauce, 1 part Vallejo Electric Blue, 5 parts Fenrisian Gray, mixed and then applied to the airbrush top down so that we leave that shadow color in the recesses. Now, once we've applied this all over the model, it looks a little too blue. Not a problem though. We're going to do a top-down zenithal only of Fenrisian Gray. This knocks back some of that powder blue effect and really creates rounded and volumetric shapes in the model. Once we've got all of our airbrush layers down, we're going to go ahead and apply our recess wash. This is 2 parts contrast medium, 1 part Space Wolves Gray. You can see I've mixed that in a small hobby tin, and I'm applying that with a large brush, working it around the model. The trick here is to go panel by panel so that you don't get coffee staining or those sort of tide marks as the paint dries. Now, after that's dry, I'm going to take some of that same Space Wolves contrast straight out of the pot, put that through the airbrush along the bottom side of the greaves in order to create a gradient there, add some visual interest. Next, we're going to go ahead and bring our highlights back out. Any place that got a little too dark, we'll take some Fenrisian Gray and paint that on. It looks a little bright here, but you have to remember that most paints dry darker than they first appear when they're applied, so you'll see that that actually blends in really well. Now here on the cape, I'm going to apply Contrast Blood Angels Red. This is a really vibrant, really pigmented red that goes over grays and light blues and things like that really well. It's going to lay down our base color of the inside of the cape in one coat. When that's dry, we'll take Vallejo Bloody Red and we're going to bring out all of our ripples and high points using that. Now, moving on from the cape, we're going to work our way around the model here and apply our golds. I don't really have any true bright shining golds. It's one of the hallmarks of the way I do Space Wolves. So we're going to use Balthazar gold, which is more like a bronze. We'll do the other details in the model, like here we're using deep gray from the Army Painter in order to paint the soft seals and joints of the armor and these floating rocks and also the base, which is still attached to his foot. Once we've got that done, we'll put on Bone White from Vallejo all over the fur. We're going to need 2 coats here. I'm going to use a detail brush in the front to make sure that I'm controlling it and I'm not getting it on any of the armor that's already finished. But when we get to the wider areas like the back here, I'm going to use a wide brush here to get the paint spread around the model as quickly as possible, cover those large areas, take up less time. Down the center of all the fur, we're going to use Vallejo Sandy Brown in order to create our darker fur colors. I'll brush that on here and you'll see along the back, it's the same thing. We're just going to bring that sandy brown in, work it down the center of the fur, leaving the outer fringes the lighter bone white color. And then finally, Oak Brown from the Army Painter down the very center in order to create that dark stripe. Next, I'll use Beastie Brown on all of the leather pouches, like the holster we see here on the front, and he has some utility pouches around the back. And on the back of the cape, which is actually a pelt, we're going to mix together a sort of tanned hide color. This is topaz skin and barbarian flesh from the Army Painter mixed 1-to-1. Now within the fur, he has a few trinkets here like these raven's feathers. I'm going to take Imperial Navy and black from the Army Painter, mix those 1-to-1 and paint the stray feathers. And once we've got all of our base coats down, we're going to move on to our washes. Here, this is Agrax Earthshade straight out of the pot. I'll apply that all over the fur and other small items like the leather pouches and medicine bags. We'll apply that along the top here, allowing it to bring out the details in the wolf's head. We want to make sure that we control this here. Don't let it flow onto our blue armor. Now the golds are all going to be shaded using a Athonian Camo shade. This is a green wash from Games Workshop. It's going to patina those, make them look more like copper or bronze. I forgot to sponge chip the armor. Normally I do this right after the recess wash dries before I paint any of the details. I realized I had forgotten to do it, so now I'm very carefully working my way around the model, doing sponge chipping to make the armor look damaged and worn, but making sure I don't get any of this burnt umber on the details which I've completed. Now we'll go through and highlight our golds using Canoptic Alloy. And with the body mostly complete, we'll move back to that base. Here, I've just applied some cold gray from Vallejo, and then I'll use Nuln Oil to shade the entire thing in order to bring out the recesses and shadows. When that's dry, a quick dry brush of white in order to bring out the highlights and create some visual interest and contrast. Now with that ready, we're going to go ahead and remove our model from its temporary base that's just hot glued on there so it pops off. We're going to use some Revell Contact to Pro. That will cure right through all the layers of paint. We'll put our model on the base and move on to our sub-assemblies. Here on the staff, some bone white on the skull, and we're using contrast skeleton horde in order to shade it. Now very carefully, in order to get our glowing runes, I'll use electric blue through the airbrush, try not to ruin any of my work. And once we've got that down, I'll take a very watered down white and a 000 brush and drop that into the recesses. Now you watch here, I overfill it. This is too much, it just sort of floods it, not a problem. We'll rinse the brush off, dry it off on a paper towel to make it dry and thirsty, and then we'll wick some of that paint back in order to bring the details out. Now, half an hour later, it looked like this with some painstaking work. I hate detail work like this. We'll go through and highlight the bones using bone white, bring that contrast back up, and we're ready to put on our first subassembly. Tamiya thin on all of our bare plastic, which we masked using poster putty, and we'll snap his staff into place. Let's move on to another subassembly. This is the Raven. Here I'm using Army Painter Imperial Navy and Black 1:1. We'll put that all over the feathers. And while that's drying, we'll move on to the metallics. This is Lead Belcher from Games Workshop. We'll do that on all of the exhaust ports. And once that's dry, we'll shade those using Army Painter Dark Tone. While we have the dark tone out, we'll go ahead and shade the power cables, and then we'll also start shading the feathers. We're going to use Army Painter Dark Tone here instead of Nuln Oil because Army Painter shades are in this strange gel substrate which does not flow as easily. They sort of stay where you put them, so that way I don't have to worry about everything pooling at the bottom of the feathers. Once that's dry, we'll use Imperial Navy, go through and just highlight the tips of the outermost feathers to create visual interest. Revell Contactor Pro along the back of the power pack, and we will join that to our model. We're almost done. We have only the head and face to do. Topaz Skin is our base layer applied through the airbrush, and then I will use Vaiho Pale Flesh sprayed only from the top down in order to leave the topaz skin into the recesses. Once we have that in place, I'll use Reikland Flesh Shade straight out of the pot, but we don't want to soak it here. We're going to make sure that our brush only has a little bit on it. We'll work that around the face and push it into the shadow areas. On the hair, Lava Orange from the Army Painter. Oranges notoriously have bad coverage, but these Army Painter paints go over in a single coat. And then we'll go back to that Reikland Flesh Shade. We're going to put that all over the hair. It's going to go into the recesses, punch up the red, sort of orangey values there, and also give us some shading. Then we'll move on to the final details. You'll notice I've highlighted all of the hair strands with yellow. I did that off camera because I can never line up the model to the camera when I'm trying to get in really close on the details. But you can see here it's really brought out the contrast, and then we'll finish up the coppers on his hair bands and also highlight them with Canoptic alloy to make them really pop. Let's get this head attached to the model. Tamiya thin using the precision applicator to get the glue exactly where we want it, and we'll put it on both parts for a solid join. Here I'll press that in very gently with my fingers. We don't want to wreck our paint or bend any of the parts, but it's not going in. There's a sizable gap on the right. I can tell it's not fitting properly, so a little blunt force did the trick, snapped it in place, and we're ready to go. Well, there you have it. Njal the Stormcaller completed for our growing Space Wolves army. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was my genuine pleasure to make and share it with you. I'm having a great time working my way through the Summer of the Wolf, and I hope you are enjoying the videos as well. If you'd like to support the channel, like, comment, or subscribe. Help drive us to the front page of YouTube. We're trying to hit 15,000 subscribers during the Summer of the Wolf. If you'd like to support the channel in other ways, you can always check out the Patreon linked in the description below. Remember that joining at any level grants you access to our private Discord server where like-minded hobbyists help each other out every day with honest and kind feedback about their projects. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.